Design in the Industrial Revolution is kind of a euphemism. We're dealing with the period of time from approximately 1815, which would be the end of the Napoleonic Wars, the end of Napoleon and the neoclassical, up to, I'd say, roughly 1880, give or take, although we're going to be moving those dates a little bit on occasion. The reason is things get muddier as we get closer and closer to the present. But the major issue in this period, what we would roughly call the Victorian, is of course going to be the Industrial Revolution, where we send small children to work and then, well, sit at home and make money. Actually, that's not quite the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution is, in fact, a rapid major change in an economy. We see it starting in England as early as 1750, but it really kicks off in Europe by about 1815 to 1850. That's where we really see that shift taking place. And what we're going to see is the introduction of power-driven machinery, or change in the prevailing types and methods and uses of machinery, which, of course, we'll see as well. Why is this of any importance to interior design? Well, of course, the furniture designers are going to start mass manufacturing. And by mass manufacturing, they're going to be using these new industrial techniques. It changes design. It changes everything. A couple of things that it changes. Time. The very concept of time is a very loose one until we get to the Industrial Revolution. If you're an agricultural society, it doesn't really matter if you meet with me right on 9 o'clock, you're half an hour early or half an hour late. We've got flexibility. The cows will still be there. The corn will still be there. We're fine. But as soon as we start moving to a shift-based industrial economy, people need to show up for their shift on time. If they don't, it messes the entire transition up. So what does that mean for you? That means this is where we start to see clocks, personal clocks, and we'll start to see watches and other time-keeping materials, things that will tell us the time that are smaller than the giant clock tower that we see in so many cities. Ideas will spread rapidly because people in the factories are doing very basic work. This is menial labor. And so they have plenty of time and mental bandwidth to sit there and chat with their neighbor, which means they're going to be chatting about sort of the news of the day and what's going on. And so new ideas, new political ideas, such as Marxism and other movements, will of course spread like wildfire through these factories, through communities, and through countries. We will see a change in construction methods. We're going to see the use of steel as well as the use of iron, which we really haven't seen much of up until this point. Almost everything was either wood or stone up until this point. So it's a major shift. We're going to see a massive change in world views. Suddenly, we see the rise of nationalism, where you identify with your nation, not your village or your town. We're going to see the rise of political parties. We're going to see the rise of revolution. Of course, revolution sweeping across much of Europe as we come into this period, but that is in large part due to the earliest elements of the Industrial Revolution. So a lot of the worldviews that people have will change. They will also see themselves as citizens for the first time, as someone who has a need to go out and change the world in which they live. Recreation becomes a huge issue. If you're working, and your average industrial worker in the middle of the 19th century is working something along the lines of 6 16-hour days and 1 8-hour day. And that 1 8-hour day would be on Sunday. So you would have a little bit of time off. As we progress, of course, we see Sunday being off, and then Saturday being a half day, and then Saturday being off. And we see the development of that weekend. And that is primarily for the working class, because the middle managers and the people at the factories realize that people need to get away. And if they're going to have time away, we need to give them something to do. They can't just sit in their tenement block in New York. So we give them parks. And here we see huge parks. I mean, this is Central Park, obviously, but in some cities we see massive recreational areas. In some areas, it is much smaller. In fact, the city of Milwaukee has a huge number of parks, primarily for this reason, because of many socialist mayors that they have in the 19th century and turn of the century period. But this becomes a huge issue. It's also why you see the Impressionists painting recreation in Paris at the end of the 19th century. But that is a whole nother story. Finally, trade. We're going to see two huge elements of trade that change everything. First, the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal splits Africa from the Middle East and allows ships to go out to India and China and elsewhere from Europe without having to round Africa. It cuts the time and it makes life a lot easier. We will also see the Panama Canal, although that's the early 20th century. Finally, railroads. Railroads will change trade because suddenly I can move things incredibly fast across massive areas. Railroads really come into being around 1850. And we're going to see every nation capitalize on that very, very rapidly. France has a functioning system by about 1850. In the United States, around 1865, 1870, we have a railroad across the nation. So this changes trade. And of course, if you're a furniture manufacturer, this is going to be really incredibly advantageous to you because now you can market all over a large nation, all over a large place, instead of one little maker kind of being stuck in that area and putting out style books. They can now send their actual furniture.